Hello and welcome to this Festival Ideas from OPP, and welcome to this thought leadership panel from the European Crop Protection Association. Today's discussion, hopefully you're in the right session and you're waiting for the right discussion, is precision and the digital age. Are they the keys to ensuring a farm-to-fork strategy, or just buzzwords? My name is Joe Lynham and I present a program on the BBC called The Newsroom, which goes out on the BBC World Service. And for many years before that, I was a business and economics correspondent on television and radio and all the various different outlets you can think of on the BBC, including the Today program and Newsnight. I hope you are all keeping well out there. It has been a very trying 6 months for a lot of us. Many of us have been affected by COVID-19, and I hope that you and your family have stayed healthy. And if you have been affected by this awful disease, you have our best wishes and condolences if it has taken any friends or family belonging to you. I will be discussing the impact of COVID-19 in relation to this sector as well and what role it may play. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on pesticides or herbicides, but hopefully we'll learn a lot over the next hour about how technology can improve the life for farmers, so that technology can guide them when to sow their seeds. Technology can tell them if there's pest issues. Technology will tell them when they should harvest their crop. And all of this in the context of the EU's Green Deal, which hopes to decarbonize Europe by 2050, a very challenging guideline. So today's session will be about the digitalization of farming. I know some you can digitize something as physical as growing food, but believe you me, it does play a huge role in how we will do things going forward. I will be speaking to key people in the sector. In due course, we hope to be speaking to Claire Berry, Director General at DG Santé or DG Health. Formerly, she was with DG Connect, so she will be able to give the technology and health perspective on crop protection in the age of COVID, in the age of digital. A lot of perspective to give us. We will also be joined by the Slovenian MEP, Frank Bogovic, who is not able to join us technically yet, nor is Claire. That means we will go to Geraldine first, but before we go to the Director General of the ECPA, I will remind you about your questions, because after we've heard a few words from each of our panelists, it'll be your turn out there in the ether to comment. On the right-hand side, you will see the chat functionality. If you see the chat functionality, you will see session. Click chat, and then below that, session. If you click event, you'll be posting questions to everyone, and they may not know what you're talking about. So please click session. Ask your question, maybe say who you would like to direct the question to. Would you like it to be to Robert from Vodafone, or Billy, the MEP from Ireland, Frank, or Claire Berry, or Geraldine? Tell us who you're from, where you're from, your name, rank, and serial number. You know how to do it. You've been doing these things in lockdown for 6 months, so it should be fairly straightforward to you. In the meantime, I am going to start with the Director General of the European Crop Protection Association. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Joe, and good afternoon to all of you. I'm a technology believer. I strongly believe that innovation plays a key role to ensuring a sustainable future for food production while preserving an affordable and sufficient food supply. As an industry that supports farmers and food production, we continue to invest in increasingly more innovative ways to protect crops, with significant investment into the research and deployment of biopesticides that have a more environmentally friendly profile, as well as precision and digital technologies, which aim to optimize the use of inputs and natural resources, leading to a more sustainable food production model. Because the reality of farming is that pests and disease are here to stay. Regardless of the political or societal pressure, they are here to stay. Therefore, we need to find innovative solutions. And there is no silver bullet in that field. farmers need to have access to a wide-ranging toolbox of complementary solutions, including chemical and biopesticides, in order to implement integrated pest management. Honestly, we want to put our money where our mouth is. And yesterday, we have launched our 2030 commitments to support the Green Deal ambitions. And 2 of our commitments focus on innovation. I'm very excited to announce that our industry will invest 10 billion euros into the development of precision and digital technologies by 2030. We will complement this with an additional investment of 4 billion euros in the research and deployment of biopesticides. We strongly believe that this investment into the latest cutting-edge technologies will bring a considerable contribution in meeting the direction that Green Deal and Farm2Fork set out. It's important to note that these technologies are designed to be compatible with the existing toolbox, but it's the policy tools, clearly the regulatory framework, that can really allow innovation to reach the farmers. I bet the first question one might be asking is, will our technologies allow the 50% reduction in use and risk set out in the Farm2Fork? Let's be clear on this. We are not against reduction targets, but the targets must be based on science and on a rigorous impact assessment to make sure that we know what will be the impact of those policies. What is for sure is that the 50% is unrealistic without access to innovation. Therefore, we call on the European Commission to incentivize the uptake of digital and precision farming technologies through measures such as the CAP or the Sustainable Use Directive that will be reviewed quite soon. We would like to discuss the use of drones in agriculture and technologies to digitally record applications, pairing it with compliance data, for instance. We would like to discuss new types of biopesticides, such as antibodies. We would like to talk about tools to make the implementation of our products faster. To conclude, let me tell you, we are really ready to play our part and to engage in discussion and partnerships about innovative solutions. Our 2030 commitments are just our way to shine.
Thank you very much, Geraldine, for that. And I will be putting some of your points that you raised there to Claire Berry from the Commission, if and when she joins us. She is having a few technical gremlins at the moment. That allows me to go to Robert. Robert McDougall is the head of enterprise public policy at one of the biggest technology and broadband and mobile phone technology companies in the world, Vodafone. Robert, let's hear your thoughts.
Yes, thank you, Joe. And given that introduction, I should probably give a bit of context as to why I'm joining a panel. I think in my experience, I find that a lot of people still associate Vodafone primarily with a company that provides services to consumers. But I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to give you a slightly different perspective on what we do, because actually providing services to a variety of business sectors, including agricultural customers, is a really important part of what we do. And we do that primarily through what we call our Internet of Things activity, or IoT. So we have approximately 100 million IoT SIMs or sensors in applications that aren't mobile phones, and those sensors and SIMs provide the value-added functionality that our business customers require. So that's something I'm very happy to give a bit more of a perspective on. In terms of the Farm2Fork strategy, I'd highlight 4 areas that are particularly relevant to what we are doing and what we are prioritizing. Obviously, the emphasis on a robust and resilient food system, and also the positive environmental impact. Both of those elements associated with digital. So we're looking at the role that digital technologies have to play in terms of those objectives. Also in terms of connectivity, very important topic, access to broadband, ensuring there is no rural-urban divide, very important topic for us as well. And then finally, in the context of data and the role that data has to play in providing socioeconomic benefits in an agricultural context. Obviously, Farm2Fork also highlights the European agricultural data space and the strategic priorities in that area. So those just to give a flavour of some of the themes that we're focusing on. Hopefully that does that. Maybe a couple of examples just before I conclude my sort of opening remarks. We're actually in Ireland partnering with the Irish Farmers Union to carry out a soil analysis trial, a variety of pilots using our IoT capability, what we call narrowband IoT, so sensors, under the ground that are helping to monitor the temperature of the soil. And that's something that we're working on and prioritizing, and obviously relevant to digital precision farming. And secondly, and Geraldine, you mentioned drones, and I can talk a little bit more about that as the conversation progresses. But we have already carried out a number of trials with the European Aviation Safety Agency, EASA, to demonstrate the capability of our networks to perform beyond visual line of sight drone trials. So we're very much aware of the fact and the opportunities that has for the agricultural sector. But I'll leave that there for now.
Thank you very much, Robert. Some very interesting things there, including underground sensors and drones. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. I see out of the corner of my eye that Frank Bogovic has joined us from his office in Brussels. Frank, can you hear me? Well, he can hear me, but his microphone is off. It's the classic unmute yourself, Frank. Can you hear us, Frank? You need to unmute yourself, Frank. All right. Well, you know what? We're going to leave Frank and we're going to go to Billy Kelleher. Billy Kelleher is a former trade minister in the Republic of Ireland and is now an MEP representing the Ireland South constituency, which has a fair amount of agriculture, Billy, doesn't it?
It certainly does, Joe, and thanks very much for the invite. I'm not quite sure what I just give an opening few remarks and we take questions from the audience, or do I
absolutely
speak away? Well, just to say, look, at the outset, I mean, some background. First and foremost, I was born a farmer. I'm a dairy farmer, although I diversified very quickly at a young age and went into politics nationally as well. So I've been out of active farming for a long time, but with a very much a strategic interest in it and a love of it. And I suppose from that perspective, it brings me on to where we are in terms of European policy around the whole Green Deal, and underpinning that in the agricultural sector, you have the Farm2Fork and the biodiversity strategy, which are both strategies that are there to move agriculture in a certain direction over the next number of years, and it's primarily focused around the whole issue of the environment. And I suppose that's where digitization, technology, robotics, drones, and all the other things that will be spoken about in the time ahead come into being. How do we, at the same time, maintain productivity, efficiencies, enhance efficiencies, but diminish the impact that agriculture has on the environment? Bearing in mind that while the population in Europe is stagnant or in decline in some areas, across the globe it is going to increase from where it is about 7 billion to 9.5 billion in the next number of years. So there's going to be significant challenges internationally and globally in feeding the population with safe food, consistently supplied at a reasonable cost to the consumer, and allowing and ensuring that there's no damage done to the environment. So when you look at the Farm2Fork strategy, panelists, I mean, it is quite clear what it is about. It is about maintaining food supply, food security, but moving to organic, reducing pesticide use, reducing fertilizer use, and minimizing the impact that agriculture has on the environment. So where do robotics, where does precision agriculture, precision farming, technological evolution and data transfer, where does that all come into being in trying to implement that particular strategy? And that really is, I suppose, what farmers are looking at in the coalface. How does it allow me to comply with future European regulations? Maybe the fact that your payments from the Common Agricultural Policy, which will be negotiated over the next number of years, will be very much contingent on you minimizing the impact on the environment, reducing your carbon footprint, reducing your methane emissions, and just having positive experience in agriculture vis-a-vis the environment. So, I mean, in agriculture, from a dairy perspective, you'd look at the whole issue of robotics in terms of milking, precision engineering, in terms or precision farming, in terms of observation of animal health, animal reproduction, and animal production as well. They certainly are very much in play at the moment, but I think with the advances in robotics in particular, you're going to see an awful lot more robotic milking, for example, which will allow two things, in my view: either farms to get much larger because of labor issues, or that small family farms will be able to survive because they will also be able to work as a dairy farm, but also have off-farm income. So I think you could actually see robotics benefiting the smaller farms throughout Europe as well, primarily in the agricultural sphere because of robotics. And that, I think, is something that Europe should look at. At the moment, you can see a consolidation of farms getting larger, less family farms, across the European Union. And if that consolidation continues, well, then you're going to see rural depopulation and just undermining of that social fabric that farms, farming families, and the broader rural community depend on. So I think robotics could be quite useful in maintaining small holdings, allowing them to have off-farm income and cows to be milked with oversight, obviously from the family, the farmer themselves, but giving them time and space to do other things as well.
Okay, thank you, Billy. I'm going to jump in there because I see that we have Frank Bogovic. Hopefully he can hear us, and hopefully his microphone is switched on. Thank you, Billy. I'll come back to you about the methane reduction, which will be an issue for many farmers. Frank, can you hear me? And would you like to share your thoughts with us? Well, it looks as if that microphone issue has not been solved. Frank, unfortunately, we cannot hear a word you're saying, which is unfortunate. Do you want to try again, whoever's with Frank, to try and plug in his microphone? In the meantime, I'm going to go back to Robert McDougall, if I may. Robert, this process of Internet of Things, this process of using technology and rural broadband, that is going to be very expensive, not least of all for companies like Vodafone, but for all technology companies and for farmers and for governments that will have to subsidize this investment.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of different elements there, I think, within that one question, Joe. But in terms of what we're doing, I mean, it's something we've been doing for a number of years now. So, we're leveraging our existing capabilities to diversify and to build on that experience through IoT. And it is a very different business model, very different pricing than traditional, mobile services, if I can put it that way. So it's something that we are doing, and we are doing it in economical fashion. But I think your question does highlight a really important issue from the customer's perspective, from the farmer's perspective, and that's something we're very mindful of and very aware of. Some of the investment considerations associated with investing in this type of technology. I'd like to give an example, actually, of a piece of work we did recently, which was looking at data and the role that data has to play in the agricultural ecosystem. We actually, because we see our role in terms of IoT is connecting devices, and we see that as an important gateway to generating data and identifying new socioeconomic benefits and new revenue streams for farmers. So we commissioned Deloitte to actually model the economic benefits associated with that. And it was what they found was very interesting. By 2027, approximately 42 billion euros worth of economic value. And I think probably the most interesting element of that was the fact that 35 billion of that was generated through sharing data across the agricultural supply chain. So, and coming back to your question, maybe just by way of conclusion, that's, I think, an interesting finding, but it is clear that there are, a variety of considerations and a variety of barriers to be addressed before you can realize those benefits. I think the investment case is one for for the agricultural community. Even banks, for example, not being sufficiently familiar with the return on investment in that sort of use case. So I think there's still a bit of work to be done in that area. So we realize that we're not there yet, and that there is work to be done.
Geraldine, can I bring you in, please? We don't have Claire Berry yet. We're hoping that she will be able to join us at some stage very soon. In the issue of money, Geraldine, are you happy that enough money has been set aside in the latest MFF or budget for the likes of rural broadband, for the likes of this kind of Internet of Things, underground sensors, all this kind of stuff? Is there enough money set aside in the forthcoming budget to help you guys?
I don't think it's really about numbers. It's more about where this money is targeted. And in that sense, yes, we are happy. But now we want to see concrete implementation of this money. You know, we are talking about a lot of digital options, a lot of innovation for farmers, but the truth is, not all the farmers have access to internet, to broadband internet. And you know, I spent my holidays in the rural area in France this summer, and I had no internet there. So we need to go back to basics.
Probably a better holiday. Go ahead, Geraldine.
So, you know, I think we need to provide the basic services first. And how we will achieve that is still a question mark. Because we understand that in some areas, it might not be economically viable to really invest for private companies in deploying the service in those areas. So in that case, we will need public support. But it's absolutely needed for farmers to get access to this basic service. And we will allow them, obviously, afterwards, to have access to all the digital technologies that we mentioned today.
Okay. I'm going to try for a third time to see if we can get Frank Bogovic. Frank, can you hear me? And quickly say something so I know your microphone. Frank, do you have us? I'm sorry, we're not having any joy at all with Frank. He even has two screens, but we can't hear him at all. Billy, here's a question for you. As someone who represents a very rural constituency, if Europe takes the lead with this farm-to-fork strategy and having the cleanest and best food in the world, won't that put European farmers at a disadvantage? Because so many other countries won't have the same kind of high standards that Europe will have in the next few years.
Well, I suppose, Joe, you would hope and assume that you have a discerning consumer out there. First of all, in the European context, you have a more discerning consumer. They want to see their product produced safely, high quality, and compatible with our environmental objectives and aims. So you would certainly believe that the more discerning people become about the environment, the impact on the environment of agriculture, that they will insist and demand that their products are produced and will have no negative impact. So from that perspective, I wouldn't, you know, while there will be challenges, I certainly believe that longer term, the sustainability and compatibility with the environment is beneficial to farmers as well. Then beyond that, from an Irish perspective, I mean, we would have always traded on our green image. So, I mean, you know, cows, you know, producing milk from grass, producing beef from grass is very much part of our image abroad. But I mean, to advance that and to ensure that there's a premium for Irish products, for example, you have to insist that it's not just about grazing grass. You have to reduce your methane footprint. You have to ensure that all of those things come into play as well. So it's not just about, you know, being just around the environment. You have to put in tangible investment to ensure that happens, and that's the key issue.
Yeah, but if you cut your methane, the only way to definitively cut your methane, Billy, is to reduce your farming with cattle, is it not? I mean, that is going to be seriously unpopular where you are elected.
Well, it's not necessarily about reducing your animals, but it's about reducing methane gas emissions. So, for example, if you move to areas of biodigestion, anaerobic digestion, using the products from the byproducts from dairy, well, very quickly you can reduce your carbon footprint, and primarily your methane footprint, more so than your carbon footprint.
Okay, Robert, back to you. Unfortunately, we're really struggling with Claire Berry from the Commission and with Frank from Slovenia. In relation to, I know you don't just do masts. I know you're into technology, Robert, but you have noticed that there are a lot of people out there during lockdown who attacked mobile phone masts and accused 5G of being a spreader of coronavirus. How do you deal with these people, Robert?
Well, first and foremost, entirely baseless and with no evidence to support that whatsoever. So we deal with that through obviously working with the authorities to ensure that those people that are engaged in that sort of activity, including burning masts in some cases, are brought to justice. And we also think that it highlights an important role about online intermediaries and the liability of the intermediaries that are hosting this sort of content. And we feel that there needs to be a stronger role for those intermediaries in ensuring that sort of content doesn't see the light of day. And I know that there's a number of ongoing policy initiatives that are underway in Brussels on that topic.
Okay, but it is, of course, difficult to deal with illogicality, isn't it, Robert? If you say there's absolutely no link, and there's no scientific link between 5G and coronavirus, we know that, but people still attack these masts all over Europe. And let me go to a question I got from a member of the audience. We've got Anne Powell's talking about organic farms. This is a question for Geraldine. Organic farms, food forests can do without all that technology. She said, and stop pushing dairy and meat all over the globe. I suspect she wants to move towards a more vegetarian world, Geraldine. That is a growing perspective. People are becoming vegans at huge pace. What would the ECPA have to say?
Agriculture is very heterogeneous, and we are really much agnostic in terms of production system. There are a wide variety of production system in Europe, and we think it should be the case. And yes, more and more people are becoming vegan, or more and more people are buying organic products, and this is why probably the Commission is pushing for an organic target in the Farm2Fork. As I said, we are agnostic with regard to that. We supply the conventional agriculture, but also the organic agriculture and everything you might have in between. I think the beauty of it is diversity. But now it's not true that the organic agriculture do not use technology. There is no reason why organic agriculture should not use technology at some point.
Okay. Another question for you, Geraldine. It's from a lady called Maria Constantinciu, and my Romanian is not great, from Belgium, currently working at Bridgestone. I presume that's Bridgestone tires. The question goes, the investment in innovation will be directed as well to young professionals and startups and researchers in the field, or will there be university partnerships in this regard to support young innovative minds in new technology in relation to Farm2Fork? Is that something you could touch on, Geraldine?
I mean, if Maria, you are talking about our investment, the one that I've mentioned, our commitments, it's really investment from our companies. So it's really dedicated to the research and deployment made by our own companies. However, we have many stewardship projects where we involve a wide variety of stakeholders, including academia, including public authorities. So in that framework, there could be a space for other type of stakeholder like academia.
Okay, Billy Kelleher from Ireland South, MEP for English language are familiar with something called NIMBYism. Not in my backyard. People who object to the building of anything. There's also another phrase, which I think is funnier, called banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anywhere. Now, these people exist, and they don't like anything being built, especially, Billy, in the countryside. What do you do when you say, listen, we have to build more technology in order to help our rural communities and our farmers as part of this new strategy? What do you say to them, Billy?
Well, I say to them very simply, I mean, if we want to have a dynamic, vibrant rural community, right across the European Union, well, then you have to invest in technologies, you have to invest in infrastructure. People who live in rural areas are entitled to reasonable standards of living, and that requires continual investment in the future. So, I mean, when we talk about biodigestion, when we talk about anaerobic digestion, when we talk about all of these things, these will require infrastructural developments, just like in previous times we had wind energy, we have solar energy, we have a lot of objections to them, but at the same time, if we are to progress with the Farm2Fork strategy, with the biodiversity strategy, with the Green Deal in general, well, then you're going to see further investment in rural Ireland and rural Europe in those particular areas. And more importantly, Joe, it's required. I mean, if we are to what we're asked as farmers and as society in general, well, then we do need that. Just in terms of what Geraldine said with regard to, when you look at the biodiversity, the Farm2Fork strategy itself, and then if you look at the urbanization of society across the globe, you will see, I think, in years ahead, what they call vertical agriculture, for example, which is very much cutting edge technology and technological evolution of how we grow, particularly in the area of organics. And that's something I think that will be tested in the next number of years, whether or not consumers will be willing to pay a higher price for a product grown near them in an urban environment. And I think that's something that will be exciting, innovative, will require a lot of investment. And if it does work, it will then see product being produced very close to where it's being consumed, particularly in the niche area initially, but moving beyond that into broader food production as well. And that's something I think that, precision farming and technology in general will be very much to the fore in offering to consumers in the years ahead in the urban setting.
Okay, Billy, can I bring in Robert, please, with a technical question? Not a it's a green and technology question for Robert McDougall from Vodafone. It's from Ludo van Berkel. How is climate change being brought along or taken along in the development of new technologies? I guess the question is, to invent new technologies, how do you ensure that it also meets the strict decarbonization rules that the European Union have introduced?
Well, we see, I mean, going back to IoT, actually as an excellent example of how technology can help reduce CO2. And, it's something we do as a matter of course. We assess how this type of technology is consistent with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And and we use it ourselves. So we're using IoT in our masts, for example, to ensure efficient energy production. So that's one example of just how important that is to us, and how we really are living and breathing it. Actually, Joe, while I'm on, I just maybe would like to pick up on a question that you sort of asked to Billy on because I think it touches on masts and coverage, because it is a really important point when we're having this discussion. So clearly, it's important that we get the planning rules right in terms of masts, and there needs to be the right policies in place regarding the height of masts, for example, because that can facilitate greater coverage. But actually, there's a number of other points also related to coverage. I mentioned narrowband IoT earlier. That's actually one of the 5G family of technologies that's been developed with a stronger signal. And so it's of real relevance to a number of agricultural applications. So in Germany, for example, we've got 90% narrowband IoT coverage in Germany. So again, it's an animal of a different stripe when we're talking about electronic communications. Also, we are advocating a proactive approach to network sharing in vast majority of circumstances. So that's sharing infrastructure with other mobile network operators so that we can ensure the best available coverage. And that's something we're doing in a number of our European markets. And then finally, I would also just highlight, and maybe this is veering slightly into spectrum policy, but we see a number of authorities are taking steps to encourage the sharing of spectrum. So we think that is something we support. Ofcom in the UK, for example, has done that. And what that means is that if there is underutilized spectrum in a rural area, in the UK, for example, we have made that available to a third-party neutral host operator who's aggregated that and then provided services to end users. The UK example was in Cornwall in the UK. So that's not an urban area of the UK. So I would point to those initiatives as being relevant to, again, going back to what the Farm2Fork strategy says about ensuring there isn't a rural divide, an urban-rural divide.
Thank you, Robert. I will come back to you with a question about drone technologies, if I may. I have a question here for Geraldine. You mentioned the impact assessment that you would support. Have you set the targets, or have the targets been announced already?
I'm not sure about which target you are mentioning. Is that the reduction target?
I'm guessing. I'm not sure either. I just got the question, but I'm going to.
Let's assume that those are the reduction targets. So the
reduction targets, yeah.
Yeah, the Farm2Fork and the biodiversity strategy set a 50% reduction target in use and risk of pesticides. As I said, we are not against targets per se, but we want this number to be a scientifically based number and not just a political number. And this is why we are requesting an impact assessment to make sure that we will know all the impacts that will derive from this target, and not only from the reduction of pesticide, but there are other targets in the Farm2Fork and biodiversity strategy, reduction of fertilizers, for instance, the organic target. There is also a target to devote 10% of the land to biodiversity purposes. We need to know what would be the impact of all the targets, all these targets together. So we don't have a specific target in mind. We just want an impact assessment. And if the impact assessment tells us, look, 50% will have absolutely no impact on farmers, on food prices, on productivity, on farmers' income, very good. But we need to have this impact assessment.
Okay, Geraldine, I am very glad to say that we have Frank Bogovic, the Slovenian MEP, and I think he can hear us, and I think he can even talk. Frank, the floor is yours.
I hear you. Do you hear me?
Yes, I do. Please tell us your thoughts. And then
thanks God. We try on iPad, PC, and now Huawei solved the problem. Okay, I don't know why, but here it works. Good afternoon. Excuse me for these technical problems.
Flip your phone to landscape mode. There we go. Yeah,
I will try.
Yeah, there we go. Then we see more of you.
Right. Thank you. Yes. No, I have problems. I don't see you, but I hear you. No problem. It's okay if you hear me and see me.
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, I tried to follow your discussion, and I think that you raised out many these topics, and I will be very short in this my speech. First of all, I heard, and all we know that broadband connection is first and the most important thing in rural areas. Then what is also very important, the knowledge of people, as we saw today in practical way through my problems, that people must know how to use and not a lot more. And so I'm very glad that in future common agriculture policy, we have the support in first of all also in agri sector to support the knowledge of people. About this, I heard about robots in milking. We heard about drones, about pesticides, about fertilizers. I think that here we have the possibility that we also ensure the traceability what we are doing, so that one of very important pillar of future agriculture will be trust between consumer and producers. And here I think we have opportunity to use these tools and also to show what we are doing, what is sometimes not easy to explain to people, and I think it will be more and more important. I work in here in European Parliament and second term in Agri and Regi Committee and try to establish this movement about smart villages, where we try to explain what is necessary to do in agri sector, but what is also important otherwise in rural areas. We start with connectivity, we start with then continue with tourism, with energy sector, with care for older people. So I think there are many things which are connected, how to ensure rural, mountain, remote areas alive, and through these digital tools to connectivity and through knowledge of people, I think it's possible. And I hope that in this new financial perspective and also in recovery plan, we will ensure enough support also from European level, which will be necessary to fulfill this gap between rural and urban areas.
Thank you. Now, Frank, you mentioned know-how and you mentioned skills. Is there enough money being set aside in the forthcoming budget to educate rural Europeans or farmers or people who live in small villages? Is there enough money set aside, and what more do you want so that they have the education and the skills going forward?
Yes, we know that in a future CAP there big support for transfer of knowledge. I think that inside CAP this we have this, but it will be very important in national strategic plans for agriculture how to do this in practice. I'm farmer also at home, and I also work at the beginning of my career between farmers to share these advices, and through my experiences, it's very important that we support young farmers and help them, and through them show the advantages of these technologies. Because in between farmers, sometimes you need to prove what you are speaking, and I'm very glad that we support all these pillars, young farmers, that we support also transfer of knowledge, digitalization, connectivity, and I think that we must find good practice and people who will be heroes in their regions, in their countries, and through this, I hope that we can succeed in future. What is one of very important thing? What to do in with small farmers, because sometimes this machinery and equipment is very expensive, and it is very important that also, and this is one of things what we try to do through precision farming, also to show that this philosophy of sharing economy also between farmers, to use equipment, to make platforms, to share it, to lease it, to make services for others. So there are many pillars, many things what is necessary to do, but I think that the main direction of CAP and also Next Generation EU goes in the right direction.
Well, lucky for you, Frank, we have Robert here, who's with one of the wealthiest and most successful technology companies in the world. So if you need any discounts on stuff, I'm sure Robert will fix you up with loads of technology for your Slovenian farmers. Just ask him a question now. He's online. I'm only kidding. Drone technologies. Tell us more how people like Frank and Billy with strong rural constituencies can use drone technologies in the future to help with their farming and food manufacturing.
Well, that's a great question, and I think it's really positive that the CAP envisages the use of new technologies to perform, CAP compliance tasks. So that will basically efficiency for farmers, such that they don't actually need to go out into the fields and perform a variety of tasks, whether it's calculating sort of various pieces of analysis relating to the soil, so that can be done remotely, also using drones, or potentially using protecting the crops and using various for example nutrients or fertilizers to ensure successful crop growth. So basically for us, I know I have to say, I mean, for a company like mine, we would partner with someone else who would be the intermediary, who would probably bring that expertise to the table. And then we would ensure that our networks are sufficiently configured to ensure that the drone can be operated safely, securely, and in a predictable way. And so that's something we've done at the moment using 4G. And as we transition to 5G, it's also going to be incredibly relevant. So I would say, it's not something we have carried out some pilots. So it's not a live application, whereas some of the other examples I mentioned before are live applications, but it's certainly something we see a lot of potential on.
Great, Robert. Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to see Claire Berry. I'm always pleased to see Claire Berry, but I'm especially pleased to see Claire Berry now with 6 minutes to go. Claire, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've had a technical nightmare, but please give us your perspective on the Farm2Fork strategy and the digitalization of farming. And then we'll fire a few questions at you. Claire Berry, the Deputy Director General at DG Santé in the European Commission. Claire.
And Joe, it's a pleasure to see you as well today. I never thought that I would be so happy to see you, but having tried for so long to get in, I think that there's something to do with because I know that a colleague had a problem as well. I think it's to the Commission computers. They don't let you access just any system. So I had to resort to my iPad to get through, but I'm very sorry about that. So at this point, I think I would just like to say a couple of things. Talked about Farm2Fork and the targets and so on that have been set out there, and obviously from the Commission's perspective, we're very much hoping that digitisation will be able to help farmers meet those targets, because the digitisation should mean they can work more precisely, efficiently, and sustainably. For example, I heard there you were asking Robert for a couple of examples. So examples that we had was that there is an EU-funded Asterix project, of course. Asterix is an interesting name, but it supported the development of a robot that applies eco-friendly pesticides only to the leaves of weeds, so it's much more targeted. And Asterix, as you might expect, of course, of a tool with a name like that, can work around the clock, weeding most vegetables and herbs at the rate of approximately about a hectare an hour. So it reduces the amount of pesticides used by about 95%. So I think obviously it's quite impressive. Another example that we had is the DESA project, which has developed a decision support system. So it gives real-time and accurate information to farmers. Frank was talking, of course, about how farmers can benefit from precision farming, but it gives them information to support their decisions about the correct timing of pesticide use, so the right time to use the pesticide. So, and the results of that are that in 1 hectare of tomato field in Italy, the results showed a crop yield increase of about 15% and a pesticide reduction of 30%, and an overall reduction in production cost by 16%. So I think this shows us just how much the impact can be in terms of productivity and also in terms of sustainability. I think what we analyse as well is that there is a bit of a gap today between the technologies that are offered and the uptake by farmers. You were talking there about digital skills and how important that is, and of course we need to make sure that money comes from not just the CAP and Horizon, but also projects like the Digital Europe programme. But we need those skills, then we need the right infrastructure, and we need the right investment in research and innovation, but also that we encourage farmers to share data and that we have more trust in the sharing of data, because obviously the data, if they can use it, is going to be hugely beneficial to them. And I understand you've already talked about broadband connectivity and the importance of connectivity, but we mentioned that, of course, in Farm2Fork as well, where we hooked up with the connectivity strategy, which said that we really need to change this gap that there is in rural areas. So we have 100% access to fast-speed broadband by about 2025. But I think if you don't mind, Joe, I'll stop there because I don't want to repeat things that people have already said or whatever. I'd rather than at that point, we do the question and answer and the discussion.
Well, thank you very much. I'm conscious that we have a few questions to put to you, but my first, in light of the pandemic, in light of the crisis, Claire, will COVID-19 and the economic an earthquake that it has caused, will that slow down the implementation of the Green Deal? Because it's difficult to see, with surging unemployment and crashing GDP, how it wouldn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, there are certain things where we have to accept that maybe there'll be small delays. But as far as the climate change is concerned, and as far as the Farm2Fork strategy is concerned, I think that COVID just shows us how important it is, for example, that we have a secure food supply chain, and that food supply chain as well is as sustainable as possible. I don't think that it should slow us down that much, actually. I think, if anything, it should accelerate our efforts in terms of trying to deal with climate change.
Okay, well, let me put a question that Geraldine Kutas, the Director General of the European Crop Protection Association, put. She called on the European Commission to incentivize farmers, to make it easier for them to use the kind of technologies that we've been talking about, whether that's under soil sensors, whether that's rural broadband. How is the Commission going to literally pay for some of that?
Well, I think, we've got declarations on farming and precision farming. I think we've got budgets now across the range of the budget, and of course we hope that there'll be money from the Recovery and Resilience Fund as well that will go into this. But I think it's not just about money, it's about attitudes, and it's about a way of looking at things. I think with Geraldine the other day and her colleagues, we talked about the fact that we have to make sure that we don't have any regulatory disincentives to be able to use new technology. So I think that's something that we're very conscious of as we go forward, which is that we really need the right kind of environment for farmers, so that they don't find that if they are open, and once they've been convinced that the technology can do things for them, that they then find that they're stymied because of pieces of regulation which have been put in place, which they then find they can't find a way around. So I think it's about the money, it's about the attitude, but it's also about getting the right regulatory environment as well.
Okay, thank you, Claire. We have 5 more minutes. We started a little bit later, so we've 5 more minutes to keep the discussion going. So if you out there in the ether have any questions, please post them under session, chat, and then session, rather than tell the whole world what your question is. Frank and Billy, do you have any questions for Claire from the European Commission? It's not often you get this kind of access to the Deputy Director General of DG Santé, or the Health. Frank, would you like to put a question to Claire?
Okay, thanks for this opportunity. First, what is, when you discuss with different countries, what is the view of colleagues from different countries? We know that the basic position is different in some countries. There we have very intensive agriculture many years, in some less intensive. What's the reflection of countries, and do you expect, what do you expect the result of also about these figures and other things? What's the position of different countries?
So I take it you mean the position of different countries on the Farm2Fork and what we're planning to do there, I guess. Okay, all right. Well, obviously, I think overall there is broad support for the Farm2Fork strategy. There's plenty of different parts of it, of course. So if we look at something like nutritional labeling, then of course you might understand that there are different approaches between, well, there's the 2 approaches out there at the moment, which is the sort of French Nutri-Score approach, and then there is the Italian approach. So of course it does depend. There are different positions of different member states on different issues. But one of the things that we're doing at the moment is that we're going to come up with recommendations for the national strategic plans, which will be part of the CAP, and there we'll go through all the different objectives that we have. So we've been looking in a very detailed way, and the audits that we've had from member states in terms of what they do on different things like animal welfare, what happens on antimicrobial resistance, what happens on pesticides, and so on. So we'll be making very specific recommendations to the member states. But we will do that once we've had a discussion with them. We're working on it internally, but we will talk with them. But I think, I understand, of course, that those member states which have bigger farming communities can be more reticent, especially on reducing the pesticide levels and so on, because they're concerned that this is not going to be win-win for farmers, that it's going to be something where they lose out. So I think, that's the difficult bit. That's where we have to convince them that it's in their interests as well. And it's not going to just mean extra money that they have to put into their farming.
Can I ask Robert the same kind of question? Robert, from a technology point of view, you'd like to put to the European Commission now that you'd like to see improved or enhanced or beefed up or reduced? Robert from Vodafone.
I mean, I think the question about regulatory impediment, I think I find that fascinating because, you know, I guess my day job is thinking about how technology evolves and the challenge of regulation and policy keeping up with that technology. So I think I find that particularly interesting. And Claire, you know, what's your approach to that? I mean, do you in the agricultural sector, are you taking steps to address any regulatory impediments, for example? Maybe that's one part of the question. And the second part of the question would be on demand side initiatives, the role of demand side initiatives of supporting some of the benefits of digital that we've talked about. Sorry, that's a two-pronged question. But
Don't, like a very good journalist, always throw in two questions when you can have one. Claire, how do you solve the supply side and the demand side?
Okay, well, I mean, this is a familiar question that I've heard several times from the telecoms industry, of course.
Yeah, they want the money.
Yeah, exactly. But they also want the fact that if they're going to invest in something, they want to be sure that there's going to be a client for it or a customer for it at the end of the day, which is fair enough, given the huge scale of the investments that have to be made to bring the connectivity online. So I think we are, as I mentioned, we will look at all regulatory barriers and see what needs to be done about them. I think the first step is to discuss and to understand properly what the regulatory barriers are. And then we can see what we need to do to get rid of them. I mean, on the connectivity piece, of course, we know that there are various hurdles that member states put in the way of telecoms companies when they want to invest and when they want to roll out infrastructure. And that's very much at the top of the agenda in terms of trying, especially now, given, you know, in the current climate where we really need to encourage the investment, that we make sure that that regulatory red tape is got rid of, or certainly we push the member states to be, you know, to get rid of as much as possible.
Claire, fantastic. Thank you for joining us, albeit a little bit late. Geraldine, I'm going to ask you to give the final word, if I may, as the Director General of the ECPA on this topic, digitalization of farming. You need to unmute yourself, Claire. I can't hear you. Oh, sorry, Geraldine.
Thank you. Let me thank all the panelists for this very interesting discussion. I think we are entering a new age, especially in the field of agriculture, where a lot of people have the impression that, you know, rural communities are very conservative and reluctant to the adoption of technology, and we know this is not the case. Referring back to the title of our panel, I really don't think that digitalization is a buzzword. I think the discussion we had today really proved that digitalization and precision agriculture are key to ensure the success of the farm to fork. With one basic thing, that would be access to high-speed internet for all rural communities across Europe, but also through the right regulatory policy framework, and to the point of Frank Bogovic, through trainings. Farmers need help to adopt the technology, to make sure that they can use it successfully, and we need to help them. I think there is a lot of burden on the shoulders of farmers today, administrative one, but also on the technology side, and we need to be with them. And on that front, we have also committed to train 1 million farmers up to 2030, really to help them to take advantage of all those new tools.
Thank you very much, Geraldine, and thank you to participants who had to take the burden of all my questions, Robert, Billy, and Geraldine. Thank you very much. Thank you, Frank Bogovic, for joining us, albeit a few minutes late. And thank you, Claire Berry, the Deputy Director General at DG Santé, for joining us as well. From me, Joe Lynham, go out there and make the world a better place. And for now, thank you. Goodbye.